All right, welcome to biology, everybody. By now, you should have had a unit package that has been distributed. If you can't find it, it's in the white box right beside the computer, just on the ledge there. So please make sure you grab that and you have one so you can follow along. I will be back on Monday, of course. We will be having a quiz on the Tuesday, and it's only going to include this PowerPoint and then a lesson I teach you on Monday. But this is 90% of the quiz, so you're going to want to make sure you get all this and you certainly do all the homework. This is probably, I would say, the or second biggest lesson in all of biology. And it's going to require you using your textbook. So if you didn't bring your textbook, please make sure after the lesson you go and grab it. All right. This is also a new unit, which means it's a new you, a new opportunity to demonstrate success. Oh, is there anything better on planet Earth? I really don't think so. So let's get into this. We are going to start by talking about the cell. And you've heard about the cell, you've studied the cell, you know all about the cell. You know that it is the smallest unit that can perform any of the function of life. And that was originally a term that was coined by Robert Hooke, and that was back in 1663. We didn't really know what was going on back then. He found it in a cork. Today, we know way more. We know that it's the building block of pretty much all life, and we've developed some postulates, which means some points about cells that we put together, and we call those things the cell theory. So we're going to take a look at that next. The cell theory has three main parts, and the first one makes all the sense in the world. Every single living organism has to have at least one or more cells in them. So you can have a single-celled organism, but more often than not, most of our organisms on planet Earth are made of more than one cell. The cell is the basic organizational unit of life. This just means that everything started out with cells. It is our building blocks. So your massive biceps, or the bottom of your feet, or your hair, everything that is alive has cells in them. All right, so pretty much everything actually other than your hair. Anything that is alive has cells. They're the things that start that off. And that leads directly into number 3, and that is that all cells came from pre-existing cells. So cells undergo division, which we call either mitosis or meiosis, depending on what type of division, and they create new cells, but they all come from pre-existing cells. Okay? This point here is also very important. Cells are alive, so every single cell is alive, and they need energy, sugar, everything. And they also need to be able to repair themselves, which is where protein comes from. But the most important thing they do is reproduce, and that reproduction leads to a lot of things for us. It leads to growth, so you get taller. It leads to repair, so if you're cut, you can heal yourself. It does a lot of things, and it replaces all the dead cells. When we're done, if the teacher could just play this video here, it's wonderful. It's 6 minutes long, and it'll take you through the entire history of the cell theory and kind of show you how it came to be. Okay, so even though we have cells, there's lots of things within cells that we have to be worried about. Those things are called organelles, and they're basically like specialists within our cell. So they're specialized little structures, and their job is to do one thing and do it really, really well. So you might have heard, like the mitochondria is something you may have studied. People call it the powerhouse of the cell because it makes all the cells energy. That's the mitochondria's job, and that's the thing that it's dedicated to doing. So all mitochondria in all cells are responsible for producing ATP, or cellular energy. The first organelle, the thing that we discovered before anything else, was the nucleus. And you know exactly what the nucleus is. It's like the control center of the cell. It's the brain of it. We're going to be taking a look at tons of organelles, so many that it's not even worth me going through them. However, you will be responsible for knowing them. So we will start with the nucleus. The nucleus is that main brain of the cell. But even within the nucleus, there's more than just that. So we have the nucleolus, which is the site of ribosome production, and our ribosomes are used to create proteins, which are very, very important. When you think of proteins, don't just think of like the stuff that bodybuilders crush every single day in their protein shakes. Proteins do more than just create muscle and repair. They also transmit messages, so proteins are very, very important. The nucleolus is just one part. There's also nuclear membranes, so that kind of helps protect our nucleus. So it's almost like the nucleus is skin. And then we have nuclear pores, which allow things in and out. So it's like the doors into our nucleus. Okay, in our cells, we have a ton of different structures. We already talked a little bit about proteins, but we should talk about cytosol. And that is like the lawn. If we put all of our organelles and we just threw them on the lawn, the thing that they would be on is the cytosol. The cytosol is the site where all these things kind of hang out. It's like this fluid, and all of our organelles kind of float around the cytosol. Okay. The cytosol and all of the organelles within it are called our cytoplasm, and that's another key word for you to know. But really, what you need to do today, now, this is the most important thing I can tell you, is this. 1.5 and 1.6 on page 12, you need to know every single name and function of each of the organelles. You need to copy that chart or know that chart or whatever you need to do, but you need to know the name and function of all of them. You'll also be responsible for labeling these things. So using diagrams kind of like this, you'll need to label what all these things are. So we were just talking about the cytoplasm. That's kind of where everything hangs out. It hangs out in that cytoplasm there. You'll also notice that we have two different kinds of cells here. This is our animal cell, and it looks a whole lot different than our plant cell. And remember, animal cells can not just be cats or doggos, they can also be us. We are animals as well. Plant cells, I'm pretty sure we all know what plant cells would resemble. So those would be like your trees, your grass. Vegetables, pretty much any plant would have a cell that resembles this, but they are very, very different. So please do not forget that chart. That is something you need to do. That is the most important thing. That is what the quiz is going to mostly be on and what a lot of your test questions will be on. The worksheets I've given you are going to be on those things, so please make sure by the end of this lesson or by the end of the time that you use to do your practice homework, you should be able to tell me about all of these things. Okay? So this is a good look at the animal cell, and this is a good look at the plant cell. There's no point going through all these things before you take a look at them. There is, however, a good point in talking about the differences between them, because if you take a look at them, they don't even look close to the same, because they're not. There are three big differences between plant and animal cells. So the first one is that plant cells have cell walls. So maybe I'll let you copy this, and then I'll talk. Okay, so the first one is plant cells have cell walls. So if we take a look, you'll notice that they have this border around them, this strong wall. So we're going to actually get a chance to take a look at the difference between animal and plant cells under a microscope, and you're going to see that these things have like strong walls between each of their cells. Animal cells don't. They're kind of like blobs that float around all over the place. These things are in rows. So that's difference number one, cell walls. Plant cells also have chloroplasts. That's where photosynthesis can take place. If we had chloroplasts, it would be awesome and you could save so much money because you could just eat the sun all the time. Unfortunately, we don't have chloroplasts and we can't undergo photosynthesis, and that's because plant cells have them. They're the ones that can undergo photosynthesis and consume our carbon dioxide. The other thing is that plant cells have larger vacuoles, and that's almost like a storage container. It stores water, nutrients, and some waste. So plant cells have a larger vacuole than animal cells, but animal cells have many, many small ones, so they almost work out to the same. So if we take a look at the vacuoles, so these are our vacuoles in animal cells, so pretty small, and there's a couple of them. But in plant cells, this is our vacuole, so it's huge. So the three differences again: plant cells have a cell wall, they have chloroplasts, these green things here, and a large vacuole. Okay, every single cell needs to breathe, so they need cellular respiration to occur. And when cells give off, or when they undergo cellular respiration, they give off carbon dioxide. But luckily, we have our plant friends that love to eat our carbon dioxide and give us back oxygen, which we love. So this is a really good relationship, because we give off poison and they eat our poison, and they give off oxygen, which we love to enjoy as well. So this cellular respiration is a complementary process with photosynthesis. And cellular respiration, of course, occurs in the mitochondria, which is the site of where energy is produced. So let's take a look at this. These lessons are always combined. They're quite short, so we do these both in one day. So why do cells divide? Most of the time, they divide to replace the cells that have been lost or damaged. So those are the two main reasons, but there are a couple more which we will get into in just a second. So we have two types of organisms: multicellular, which means obviously more than one cell, or we have unicellular, which means one cell. So those are only two options. You can either have a one-celled organism or a more than one-celled organism. So something like a paramecium would be considered a single-celled organism. And us, we're obviously composed of more than one cell, so humans would be a good example of multicellular organisms. Okay, so cell division, we're actually going to do a couple of, at least a week about cell division, but what we need to know right now is it's a process where we have one cell, aka our parent cell, that's like the OG cell. It divides into two identical daughter cells. So let's think about that again. We have one cell, it divides into two identical, and that's the key word, it has to be exactly identical daughter cells. So it's like one parent cell does like a control C and then a control V twice. It just copies and pastes itself twice. So a good example is when we cut ourselves, our skin heals ourselves, and it's through cellular division. So we just create a lot of cells in this area and we patch over our cut. Three reasons we divide. Number one is for growth, to get taller or bigger or to repair lost things. So we do it to growth. We also use it for repair, kind of like what we showed right here, and we also use it for reproduction. So to produce new offspring, we must have cell division. Okay. In life, there's lots of different things where pressure is applied or important. So even like wind. Wind happens because we have a high pressure system moving to a low pressure system. In biology, that kind of same process happens. That's called diffusion. It's when we have molecules that are in an area of high concentration. So just take a look down here. We have molecules in an area of high concentration. There's tons of molecules in here. They want to move to an area of low concentration. So they start moving through this little membrane here so they can balance themselves out. The whole universe is about being in balance, and biology is no exception. It wants to have a good balance. So we move from an area of high concentration to low concentration. That is diffusion. So if you're going to highlight anything here, high concentration to low concentration. That's what everything does. Everything in nature always wants to move from high concentration to low concentration. So we have a cell membrane, and that's almost like the skin of our cell. And that allows things in and out, but it's pretty smart. It only allows certain particles to move in and out. So things like oxygen or carbon dioxide, those things need to undergo a little bit of a change before they're allowed in or out. That's why it's called selectively permeable. It chooses what particles to allow in and out. Now, diffusion is cool because it's a passive process. So that means even if you had no energy in your body, diffusion would still occur. Passive means it doesn't require any energy for it to take place. All right, now when we think about diffusion, I need you to think about you, all of you in your classroom right now. And if I told you there was, I don't know, a free $9,000 check outside the door, you would all want to get outside of the door as quick as you possibly could. That's because there's many of you inside the class and you want to move outside the class. So right now you're in an area of high concentration. You want to move to an area of low concentration, aka where the money is outside the door. So what are some factors that affect it? Well, the first one is the surface area of our cell membrane. And remember, that's the thing that lets us in or out. So it's like our skin on our cells. But in our classroom, we have only one thing that lets us in or out. It's our door. If our door is big, it makes it very easy for you to diffuse to get out of the classroom. And that's the same thing with our cell. The bigger the surface area of our cell, the faster diffusion happens. So if you could write that down, increase in surface area means an increase in diffusion. Same thing with our door. If I made my door 4 times as big, you could diffuse much quicker. The second thing is the concentration difference. So the bigger the difference, the quicker diffusion happens. And that makes sense because if there were 900 of you in that classroom that you're in right now, and there were 850 people outside, well, there still might not be that much space outside. So not too many people are going to diffuse, and they're not going to be in such a rush to get to another highly populated area. So if there was 900 people inside the classroom and there were 0 people outside, well, yeah, now people are going to rush to get outside because they can be one of the first ones out there. There is a big difference. So the bigger the difference, the faster diffusion happens. The third thing is the distance. Right now, you're pretty close to the door, but if I made this classroom 3 kilometers long, diffusion would slow right down because you'd have to walk 3 kilometers just to get to the door and to diffuse across the membrane. Same thing happens in cells. The smaller the distance that we have to travel, the faster diffusion can happen. So the particles that are close to our membrane can pass obviously much farther than those that are faster than those that are farther away. Oh no. And the last one is temperature. Temperature is, remember, just the average kinetic energy, so how fast things are moving. So if we kick the temperature up and things get super, super hot, things are going to be moving around very, very quickly. And that leads to things moving faster, which leads to a faster rate of diffusion. Okay. So we know what diffusion is. It's moving from an area of high concentration to low concentration. There is one very, very special type of diffusion, which is called osmosis. And that is just the diffusion of water from an area of high to low. So we have regular diffusion, which is just diffusion of particles, and then diffusion of water is called osmosis. And this tends to happen until we basically even it out, and that's what we're shooting for, until we have the concentration is the same on both sides. All right, and the last thing, we cannot have cells becoming too big, because if they become too big, it takes way too long for things to diffuse. It's such a long journey that it's not even worth it. So before they get too big, they end up dividing, which is a very, very good thing for the cell, because if the cell was too big and we needed nutrients from one side of the cell to the other, it's almost like traveling across Canada. You can't get there. But if you broke Canada up into all of its provinces, well, now we can get things from one edge of a province to another much easier than one end of a country to another. So cells can't get too big for those exact reasons. And I think that is it. So please make sure you are doing those worksheets. The solutions to all of them are posted online for you.